Hello and welcome to Better Gaming, an event and podcast series dedicated to all aspects of ethical gambling, as we seek to discuss how to make gambling and gaming safe, secure, and socially balanced for everyone. My name's Jim. I'm the host of the show. And in this video, I'm going to be talking quickly through an article that you can see on the screen here from The Guardian. It was published Friday, 31st of January. It's now the following day, but I wanted to jump on over the weekend just to highlight its importance because it gives some brilliant insight into the transformational change of the US market since the US Supreme Court overturned a ruling, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail. But essentially, the headline of fast food gambling really resonated with me just in terms of explaining the dangers of problem gambling and gambling harms and how it is a public health matter and crisis, and one that is particularly growing within the US market. And it is something that needs to be addressed. As Strapline says, I think that anything is good in equal measure. So it just needs balancing out in order to avoid any of those sort of situations. So the article is written by Leander, not even going to attempt that last name. I did Google them to try and get on LinkedIn to see whether I could have them on the podcast, but they don't seem to have a LinkedIn profile. So I'll have to do a bit more research on that. But essentially, they are looking at how the accessibility of the sports betting operators now infiltrated throughout the US since, as I mentioned, that US Supreme Court that overturned the federal law that banned states, and essentially 38 states went rushing to legalize sports gambling to get the tax revenues. And they also at the same time did mobile and online gambling, which is that mobile first thing and goes back to the fast food element of accessibility, followed up by a public health crisis. Essentially, with that market being in a state of high growth or hockey stick growth, you can see here from the article that the advertising of the sports betting industry has just absolutely ballooned, and it's now pegged at more than $1 billion a year from 2021 through to 2023, according to the American Gaming Association. And pretty much like the sports industry over in the UK, they're now having a problem whereby the advertising revenues have become so attractive that, let me find where I can see it here. That it's infiltrating all aspects of the sport. So over the course of an NBA or an NHL broadcast, the viewer will see the logo of a betting company or hear some reference made to gambling 2.8 times per minute, according to a study. And that's something that the advertising authorities over in the States will have to start implementing quite soon. Over in the UK, steps are already being made by different sporting bodies and councils and authorities to limit that. And it's something that the US will just going to have to play catch up with. There is a comment by Dr. Timothy Fong, who's an addiction psychiatrist, and he says basically ESPN is a 24/7 casino ad right now. And this is the worrying part of the quote here, which says the normalization has gone so deep, so fast. Sports gambling has gone so viral that it's beyond normalization. It's endemic. And when you start talking about endemic, you start talking about public health elements to it. So scaling back up. It's quite an in-depth article, so I would recommend people taking a look. As mentioned, I will put it in the show notes for ease of reference. But essentially what they're saying now is that here, somewhere between 60 to 80% of high school students reported having gambled in the last year, according to the National Council on Problem Gambling. And the study commission found that 58% of 18 to 22-year-olds had bet on sport, although it should be said that in most states this is illegal before the age of 21. And essentially, it also mentioned that, as you can see here, from the normalization of a taboo, there's already a public health crisis. So it's essentially leading to a lot of people being under financial strain, and that gambling has the highest potential for, let me just highlight it here, because I cannot get deranked. So that's a really worrying element for it. With anything, there's a lot of people that have had their lives ruined by this. I think essentially what we're trying to get to is that balance, whereby people can have a bet, but they're talking about, and this is something that is making me reconsider some of my views, but they say it's not the dough, but the dopamine. And there was a recent report by the Gambling Commission which said that it ranked the reasons why people did bets, and the lowest rank was like 58% because they made money, which I always thought that was a worry. And all the rest was because it's fun, because it enhances sports watching and that second screen experience, and the chances of a big prize. Now, what essentially, and I dismiss that as, well, that's just betting. But then clearly when you're talking about dopamine hits and you're talking about the addiction element of it, and once you start spiraling into that addiction, what you're going to have is you're going to have a problem with getting your way out of it. So as much as people talk about the elements of ease of betting, you just got to be mindful that people can go into that slippery slope. And there's something that they're talking about with the psychology of the sports betting apps, in terms of how they're making it so easy for people to lay bets down. And they're talking about how, until you had online sports betting, nobody had ever bet on whether the next pitch was going to be faster or slower than 95 miles per hour. You're betting on all of these micro positions. It's just an opportunity to push the button. And I think that's where you start getting worried. And they also talking about the AI element of powered in-game bets, where they appear and disappear so fast that it's impossible for the user to work out whether the odds on them are worth the wager. And this is all of that element of an educated consumer laying a bet down in the right mind. So great article, highly recommend it. And just on a final point where they're talking about the mental health element of gambling, yet once gambling tips over into addiction, the stigma remains pervasive. In fact, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, a standard guideline for mental health, did not reclassify gambling problem from an impulse control disorder to an addictive disorder until 2013. And what's more, it's perhaps the easiest addiction to hide. Unlike other addictions, there are no natural visible warning signs. You can't drink $1,000 of vodka in one night. I can make $1,000 bet right now and I'll show no visible manifestations. I think I was on LinkedIn during the week and I saw a screenshot. I think it was from a Epic employee. They were doing a presentation to a school or a sports group, and I think they called it the invisible addiction. And I think that's the problem with it, because there's no substance abuse and there's no physical manifestation, as that person says there. So, super interesting. Highly recommend it. I'll put the link in again, and I'll see you in the next video.